I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and I honestly did not expect my Jurassic World video to get as much attention as it did, especially for something that was off the cuff. So I figure I may as well follow up on it because I've seen a lot of responses, and I think it's worth addressing certain things that were brought up in the comments. You know, I gotta be honest with you, actually as I was uploading it, like literally, as I was watching that bar tick away the percentage until it was fully uploaded, I actually did think, should I upload this? I'm starting to wonder, maybe I came on a little too strong or something, but you know what? Forget it. I don't need to doubt myself. I'll just put it out there, I'll see what happens, and depending on what people say, I'll do a follow-up. And now here I am. So I'll just ease us all into this by starting with something that honestly came as a surprise to me. That a lot of you out there actually like the Jurassic Park 3 Raptors. I really am shocked by that. I'm not judging you for it, I'm just saying I'm surprised because, well, back when that movie was released, I was there. I remember the responses. Nobody liked the way the Raptors had been redesigned, as far as I could tell. I mean, it wasn't the worst thing that people had to say about Jurassic Park 3, because there's so much about that movie that just... But anyway, like I was saying, it wasn't the worst thing about JP3, but it was just another thing people were complaining about. I also have a distinct memory that, at least where I lived, the Jurassic Park 3 figures weren't really moving that much at all. Like, nobody was buying them. There was never a scarcity of them. And if you judge a franchise movie by the amount of merchandise it sells, well, that made it pretty clear to me that nobody really wanted the Jurassic Park Raptors or anything to do with JP3. But I guess there's the old saying, that was then, this is now. I mean, I really don't know what caused this change. I just know that a lot of you are out there saying that you like the JP3 Raptor designs. And, hey, more power to you. I personally don't. I'm pretty sure there are still a lot of people out there that don't, but whatever, it's just one movie, one design. I mean, heck, people's attitudes towards the Star Wars prequels have changed these days as well. Then again, I can at least pinpoint where that change in viewing the Star Wars prequels has come from, because the Star Wars fandom has recently gotten a heaping helping of perspective, thanks to Disney, of course, but I digress. So, again, I'm not judging anyone who does like the JP3 Raptor designs. At the same time, though, I think there's a clear reason why, when it came time for Jurassic World, they went back to the classic designs and just pretended like the Jurassic Park 3 Raptors didn't happen. Either way, though, that's the least of the things that I feel like I have to respond to. So, let's move on. The primary thing that had me thinking, maybe this movie is gonna ruffle some feathers, if you'll pardon my saying so, was my addressing of the paleontology aspect of it, and the whole scientific accuracy of the dinosaurs by way of looking at actual paleontology. I could have possibly omitted that part entirely. It was a bit of a tangent, I think, looking back on it, but I kept it in anyway. And honestly, I thought it was all sound. Like, I was following the news as much as I could. I don't have that much time, but I did check stuff out. And I was seeing more and more stuff that was chipping away at the theory that T-Rex had feathers, for example. And then, of course, we had the unveiling of the Sue statue, which was commissioned by the museum and had all sorts of scientific research put into it to make sure that it really was the most scientifically accurate representation of a living T-Rex. And when I saw that, and I saw that there were no feathers to be found on it, I basically thought, well, that's that. I guess the feather theory has been abandoned, and I hadn't really heard anything since. Ergo, I felt fairly confident in putting all of that stuff forward when I spoke in the previous video. Perhaps I came on a little too strong. I can recognize that there were parts in that particular part of the video where I was being a bit antagonistic. For that, I apologize. It's not necessarily that I'm retracting everything I said, because I still don't really think there's any solid evidence for feathers on the adult T-Rex, but well, at the same time, I probably could have handled that part a little bit better. Certain people who saw the video have reached out to me. They want to have a discussion about this sort of thing. Not like they're going to try to get me, at least I don't think that's the case. But I have reached out back to them, and nothing has actually happened yet, but I'm sure something will. Even so, that seems to be the thing that people have really latched onto when responding to me. And the fact of the matter is that there is no fact of the matter. People have presented me with other reconstruction models of T-Rex that do incorporate feathers, not necessarily the big floofy feathers like people initially thought, but more of a fuzzy, downy sort of feather. And they were pointing to that and going, well, this had scientists looking into it, this was scientifically researched, and it's just as viable as Sue. And the response to that, of course, is, okay, but Sue had a bunch of science put towards her reconstruction, and that's just as viable as yours. And it just becomes a cycle of he said, she said. So ultimately, I feel like the only takeaway I can really get from this whole thing is that there is no takeaway. The feather theory is debatable at best. People have their particular camps that they have set up in, and they're going to keep at it and keep debating it until we actually get something that is incontrovertible, something that will definitively tell us whether or not a T-Rex in its adulthood had feathers or not. Until then, I really do still stand by what I say, in that I don't think it's really necessary to put feathers on a T-Rex when it comes to the movies. And honestly, that's been my ultimate point. I know I already said it in other videos, but I feel like I can maybe make the point a little bit better by putting it in a slightly different way. I'm sure that if you've hung around film buffs for long enough, you may have heard at some point some variation of the phrase that cinema is a language. And I agree. Cinema is a very distinct form of storytelling that does have its own sort of internal language. Not necessarily a language like what I'm using right now to speak, but a language of a sort. The thing is, though, that not everything always translates from one language to another. The language of reality, for example, doesn't always translate into the language of cinema. I already devoted at least part of a video to this back when I was discussing realism in the MonsterVerse. I'll provide the links because I don't intend to repeat myself here, but just to give you a little taste, it was discussing the helicopter sequence from Kong Skull Island, where they're flying from the ship through the storm to the island itself. Thanks to the fact that my father is an aviation expert, and I actually had him in the video, I know that the only thing that scene gets right is that helicopters can fly. Everything in that scene can be measured in real-world terms, even the perpetual storm, and it got so many things wrong, but deliberately so, because that made the scene more dramatic. It added tension, it added excitement, it was cinematic. But that's not the only example I can cite. Sticking to the realm of helicopters, Jurassic Park, the original movie, the helicopter that they used to fly to the island, again, I know this because of my dad, that helicopter does not actually have that much space inside. So when you're looking at the scenes of the characters inside and they have their legs stretched out, like they're just sort of comfortably lounging? Impossible. There's not enough space inside the helicopter for them to do that. It's actually very cramped in there. But if they had stuck with the actual dimensions of the helicopter, they would have had the problem that the characters would have been so squished together that the camera wouldn't have been able to frame them properly, and the scene would have felt really close and uncomfortable, kind of interfering with what's meant to be the main point of the scene, which is that we're meant to feel a sense of anticipation and wonder as we approach this island with this natural beauty around it that Hammond is so proud of. So, alterations were made. The interior of that helicopter was made more cinematic. Sticking to the realm of aviation, but moving more into the direction of the Air Force, let's look at Top Gun. Top Gun is a relatively grounded movie. It doesn't have any space battles or monsters or fantastical elements, but it still takes some liberties. One of those liberties is kind of a minor one. You will notice throughout the film that some of the characters don't often wear their uniforms the way they're supposed to. Say, Tom Cruise is not wearing his hat when he's on the base, even though he should be, because that's regulation. Or there might be some little detail, just a tiny one, almost imperceptible, but it's still not right. Now, technically speaking, there is a reason for that. In the United States, and presumably elsewhere, but definitely in the United States, it is against the law to impersonate a military officer if you are not in the military. And everyone in Top Gun had to do that. Well, almost everyone. They were playing soldiers and pilots and high-ranking officials in a branch of the military. They had to basically be impersonating military officers. So, in order to sort of get around that, they exploited a loophole by not wearing the uniforms exactly. Now, whether or not that was truly necessary because the movie actually did cooperate with the Air Force and it was understood that these actors were just there to make a movie, who knows? But they did it anyway, I guess as a sign of solidarity. However, there is another aspect I can point to that's actually pointed out in the behind the scenes of the movie, where, you know that iconic classroom scene, let's call it, where you have all the chairs and desks pointed towards the open end of a hangar where there's a little setup for someone to be speaking, and there's a big American flag hanging over that. As they were setting up that scene, the actual military officers who ran the base where they were shooting went up to the director and said, "At no point in the history of the United States Air Force has there ever been a setup like this at all. It is not true. It's completely fabricated." To which the director responded, "Well, yeah, but it's going to look great in the movie. People who are going to see this on the screen will love the way this looks, and they want to see something that looks good. So we're going to film it anyway." And they did, and it's in the movie, and the military officers who said it was unrealistic, when they saw Top Gun in its finished form, even they said, "Darn, he was right. It does look better." Again, it's not real, but it's cinematic. Sticking in a military realm, but moving to a completely different time period, we have the movie Braveheart. Braveheart has one of the most infamous historical inaccuracies ever committed to film, in which the Battle of Stirling Bridge doesn't feature a bridge. Instead, it's set on this wide open plain so the armies can charge at each other, and you can get these big epic shots of Englishmen and Scotsmen duking it out medieval style. And again, like I said, wildly inaccurate, but very, very cinematic. And that's why people who like Braveheart are usually willing to give it a bit of an excuse. Like, yeah, you probably could have adapted the Battle of Stirling Bridge as it actually happened, but this is just something that looks much cooler, you have to admit. And mind you, those are just some specific examples I can give. I haven't even gotten to stuff that appears across multiple different movies and series. Stuff like sound in the vacuum of space, or people breaking through windows and not getting lacerated by the shards of broken glass that fly around them or are resting on the floor when they land, or heck, the three-point superhero landing that's become so iconic. None of that, as often as it appears, none of it is realistic, but it's cinematic. You have sound in space, for example, because if you're just watching silent spaceships firing at each other, it lacks that particular punch. You're just looking at pictures. You're not really experiencing it fully. But you start adding some buzzing to the lasers, some humming to the engines, some shrieking maybe for the engines, depending on what kind of effect you're trying to get. You add the sound, that really puts you in the scene. And I can anticipate that some people will bring up things like, say, Firefly or 2001: A Space Odyssey that didn't incorporate sound in space because they were trying to be more realistic. Okay, fine, but the counter-argument to Firefly, at least, is that Firefly didn't really contain many space battles. The big space battle that happens towards the end of the movie, Serenity, made a point of moving it into an area where there was an atmosphere so they could have the sound effects and have it be more exciting. And in fact, Serenity itself breaks the rule of no sound in space literally at the very end. As the ship is flying off the planet and it's in space, it's left the atmosphere, it's silent, the only sound we hear is the music, but suddenly a panel flies off and hits the camera, it makes sound. And the reason it makes sound is because that has to emphasize what just happened. If you perhaps were thinking, okay, the movie's clearly over, I'm going to zone out, I'm going to turn my phone back on, grab my hat, and get ready to jump up and leave as soon as the credits roll, that sound will draw you back in. And it had to be done. It was cinematic. And as for 2001: A Space Odyssey, the lack of sound in space did technically help generate a sense of atmosphere, ironically, but at the same time, you get that accuracy, but you also get an inaccurate depiction of the moon, where the moon has these tall, craggy mountains and deep, sharp crevices, similar to the paintings of Chesley Bonestell. Now, obviously, the moon doesn't look like that. It has low, sloping hills and is largely just sort of a smooth surface with very wide craters, but nothing really in the way of sharp canyons that go down or anything. The aesthetic to go with a Chesley Bonestell vision of the moon was still deliberately chosen because it looked better. It looked cooler on the screen. So even with the accurate depiction of a soundless vacuum of space, you have an inaccurate depiction of the moon. It's always something. I can do this all day. I can keep bringing up examples, but I think I've made the point. Cinema always trumps reality, or it always trumps certain parts of certain books that just aren't going to fit. Basically, the only time you're not going to have something like that happen is with a documentary. Actually, not even then. The language of cinema still holds sway over the documentary. Despite being actual reality, you can still have editing tricks that put certain scenes together, juxtaposed or spliced or what have you, to make it look like something's going on that maybe wasn't. Or you might arrange certain scenes out of chronological order so that it has more of a narrative flow. Or you have examples like Nanook of the North, the very first documentary film where scenes are just staged outright. The fact of the matter is, if it's cinematic, it has to be included. Going in the opposite direction, doing something that is realistic over something that's cinematic, can be detrimental. What was the biggest critique of Christopher Nolan's Tenet? The sound mixing. How he went with realistic sound levels, so a voice may not necessarily carry over an explosion or a gunshot or something, but at the same time, that meant that what the characters were saying couldn't really be heard by the audience, which was a problem if they were saying something important. That seems to be a trend with Christopher Nolan, actually. He seems to have this odd fascination with getting the sound levels in that particular way, but that's a bit of a tangent. I think I've made my point, though. The point is that cinema is the priority when you're making cinema. The language of cinema is necessary in order to speak cinema. And when it comes to dinosaurs, more people want to see scaly dinosaurs on the screen than they want to see feathered ones. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. Now, I recall down in the comments section of that aforementioned Monsterverse video where I and my father deconstructed the helicopter scene in Kong Skull Island, some people were saying, okay, that's all well and good, but honestly, most people aren't going to know all that stuff about aviation anyway, so isn't it kind of odd to be picking that apart and using that to prove the point? Well, I agree that not everyone is necessarily going to know all that stuff about aviation. Not everyone is necessarily going to know everything about dinosaurs either. All they care about is whether or not the dinosaurs and the helicopters are portrayed in a cinematic way. Because they're going to see a movie. And that is my ultimate point. Aside from which paleontological theories are true or false, aside from who likes the Jurassic Park 3 raptors, that really is my ultimate point. If you want your movie to work, you've got to use the language of cinema. You've got to consider whether or not something is properly cinematic. If it's not, it should be. Or you can make it not cinematic and face the consequences when it ultimately lands you in hot water. So that's where I stand. Again, I do feel like I maybe came across a little too strong when it came to certain things in that past video, and I do apologize for that. If I got anything like blatantly wrong, I'll see what I can do and maybe address that later, but for now, I still stand by the majority of points I made, particularly that in Jurassic Park in particular, and just with dinosaurs in general, the priority is being cinematic. And if that means getting rid of the realism, that's just something you have to accept. I've accepted it, at least. Okay, so I guess that's about it. Now I really am going to move on to the scripted, properly edited Jurassic World videos. And a couple other things too, but we'll get to those when we get to those. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni viewer signing off.
Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books, Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.